This is a new video about writing a novel in 8 layers. I'm going to go over the 8 layers and add a few time-saving tips and tricks into each layer. I have other videos in this writing in layers technique in a playlist called A Peek Behind the Novel series. I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. Layer 1. Putting together the skeleton of the mystery and/or the crime. In a mystery crime novel or thriller, the clues and their revelations need to be planned so the story clues can remain disjointed in the beginning, but then slowly come together like a jigsaw puzzle. This keeps the reader guessing, which is part of the mystery reader's enjoyment. Layer 1 requires the skill of a story engineer, not so much an author. In my humble opinion, trying to write around this initial phase of story scaffolding is one reason why novels can take authors years to finish. So the first layer is to storyboard only the crime or the mystery of the novel. This layer can look like a long list of crimes and clue elements, or it can look like a mind map sketched in pencil on the back of a large piece of wrapping paper, or it can be done in a mind mapping software. But there will need to be initial planning of where the mystery begins, where it leads, and where it ends. That's what goes into this layer. An example for a layer 1 crime mystery would be the following. 1. Lay out the chronology of the crime. Who is or are the victims? What is a list of clues that could lead to the solving of this mystery? Determine what the final clue will be that reveals the true culprit, and think about how you can hide this clue in plain sight. This will be the clue that solves the mystery. 5. Determine what the first 3 or 4 clues will be that will bring in multiple suspects. Give each suspect a motive for the crime and decide how and when you will reveal this motive. Next, choose an unlikely suspect and give this person a really good cover story. Next, even at this early stage, figure out how the mystery or story will end. This can be changed during the creative process, but knowing where your story will end will give you a writing destination. This will prevent you from winding up in a corner somewhere or writing yourself into a tangent that will have to be nixed anyway. Now, sometimes you will be writing a story that has a mystery ribboning through it, but it's not necessarily an organized crime or as detailed as an actual crime mystery. Your outline will be shorter, but will contain the skeleton of all the action. Below, I'll give you 2 examples of writing a ghost story and writing a gothic scary house story. So in the ghost story, you want to figure out who is the ghost. Why has the ghost arisen? Why is the person not resting in peace? What is the ghost's purpose for appearing? This is the backstory that will be dropped like breadcrumbs throughout the story. How can the ghost first appear that will raise the question that maybe the viewer is just crazy, or maybe the viewer is just paranoid? Give them a reason for this paranoia. How will the ghost appear, and what clues will the ghost drop in order to trigger more of the mystery behind the appearance? Choose how the story will end and if the ghost will achieve its goal or whether the ghost will now rest in peace, or will the ghost be back for another book in the series. In a mysterious house novel, you would want to know, what is it about the house that's creepy? What is the house hiding? Is there a secret room? Is there a hidden person? What happened in the house that now makes it haunted or unsettled? How will the mystery of the house play out? What is the chronology of the clues about the mystery of the house and why it is haunted? These are the breadcrumbs in this kind of a storyline. So choose how this story will end, and if the house is destroyed or if the house destroys someone in the process. But again, the ending doesn't have to be written in cement. Now let's talk about the format of Layer 1. Layer 1 can be done in a list format, or with a mind mapping software, or even with a pencil drawing on your own storyboard or on the back of a large piece of wrapping paper. Choose whatever format helps you the most. If you're new, try each one. Finding the right tools for the right job is very helpful. If your level 1 looks like any of these, then you get A+ on Layer 1. Now we go to Layer 2. Now it's time to break up this chronology into either a 4-part story structure or a 3-act story structure, whichever one you care to use. So open up a fresh manuscript document. I'll demonstrate using Scrivener, as that's the program I use. And this layer takes all of about 5 minutes. Layer 3, writing the scene outlines. In Layer 3, you will refer to the skeleton of the crime outline you already created, following the chronology of the crime and the clue drops. Write out each scene. This is nothing more than another list of what needs to occur in each of these scenes. You are not the writer yet. You are still the story engineer or the storyboard creator. This is the second phase of scaffolding, that is setting the story up for when the writer comes in. The list should be concise, more like a list than big paragraph chunks. Here is a scene template that I use. I don't worry about choosing the point of view in this layer because I wait to see who claims the scene or who steals the scene before I actually assign a point of view. But I include it in my 3-line scene template. So in each scene, you're going to choose a time and a location. Now, in some stories, the time will be important, and sometimes it won't, but at least it will let you know whether it's day or night. If everything is happening on one day or now it's a new day, it can be helpful. Choose a time and location, but don't describe the location or even the characters yet. The purpose and the clues is a reminder that everything written has to have a purpose in the scene, and every scene in the mystery should have some clues or a crime. So here's a tip about the scene template. Occasionally, if you're writing a story where you need to remember some things, you might want to include it in your scene template. For example, one of my stories, the drug fentanyl kept coming up. And for the life of me, I could not memorize how to spell it. So I just put it in the scene template, and it was there for whenever I needed it. And occasionally I've had a character that goes from, I write in series. So the character might have been mentioned in book 1 and doesn't appear again until book 3. So sometimes I keep some spellings that I have to be careful about in my scene template. So now we go to Layer 4. And layer 4 is the down and dirty first draft. Now you're the writer. So in layer 4, the scaffolding is now all in place, and now it's time for you to start writing the story. The first draft is the hardest layer of writing. It may help you to think of yourself as more of a town crier. Your job in this layer is to blurt out the entire story. Just get it down on paper. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, descriptions of people. Like the cops say, just the facts. Write out the story and don't look back. Don't reread anything. Don't get lost in verb tenses. Just write and don't look back. Only look at your scene outline to make sure you have covered everything that needs to be in that scene. That's the only concern. Now, things to worry about in the first draft are making sure that all of your clues and anything else from your scene outline gets into the scenes. Things that don't matter in the first draft are spelling, grammar, sentence structure, too many adverbs, scene or character descriptions, foreshadowing, cliffhangers, quote marks, etc. Just write what happens in each scene with whatever dialogue comes to you at the time. I just want to give an explanation for layer 4. During layer 4 and even in layer 5, you will get at least 1 or 2 new creative ideas to improve your story. And it may require you to change the job of the main character, or maybe the city that they live in, or you may need to change some other location to make it all work. So any time that you have spent building this character and or the job descriptions or a scene location, this will be lost. Or worse than being lost, you may get too attached to what you wrote and now won't allow yourself to go with what you know is a better idea. So trust the process and keep it simple in layer 4. Okay, so now we're at layer 5. Layer 5 is the first proofread, but it's really a read through. This is the layer that you're going to add the descriptions and the necessary background. I call this the first proofread, but it's really just a read through. Run a grammar and spell check in the beginning, and this will clean up some of the down and dirty mistakes you made in layer 4. Begin to read through now as a writer. This is the layer that you will put in the descriptions of your main characters and the scene descriptions. But you are not line editing in this layer. You are reading for context and to make sure that your sentences flow one to the other and that the chapters flow from one to the other. So a layer 5 checklist is this. Are there any descriptions you need to add in this scene? Is there any surprise in this scene? And if so, can you rewrite it to make that surprise be a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter? And has the point of view been established? And just check to make sure that there's no head hopping. Now, I self-publish, and I admit that I allow myself one head hop per scene. But I always put it at the end, so the reader is not going back and forth. You can do whatever you want. The publishing houses probably frown on this kind of thing. But like I said, I allow myself to have one head hop at the end of the scene. Now, here's another tip that I came upon recently that I found so helpful. Like I said, I write using Scrivener, and I use the find and replace feature, and I set things up so that I automatically focus on 3 weaknesses that I have. For example, I capitalize INGs, like beginning, starting, so that as I'm reading through, I can't just read over any of them. Because they're all in caps, I have to stop and change it, but it makes me focus on whether or not I want that ing verb or whether I can change it to past tense. I also make begin and began all in caps because I tend to use those words instead of using just the verb. And this also makes me see every single one of them. And I do the same thing for the phrase in order to. And so by the time I read through and correct all of these mistakes, I get a good feeling at the end that I don't have to worry about those 3 of my favorite mistakes because I've now taken care of them. So now we go on to layer 6, and this is the second proofread. Now this is the first layer, where you begin to polish your writing. You can start again with a spell check and a grammar check, if you want to. Read through for context, and this time look at your sentence structure and your verb choice. Layer 6 is the layer where you're going to be looking at the sentence structure and changing it so that it's just not rambling sentences one after the other. You're turning it now into prose. Now, because I write in Scrivener, in this layer, I also add in keywords. In other words, if I read a scene and it has an interview with witnesses to a crime, I will use the keyword interview. I write police procedurals. So anytime there's an interview, I use the keyword interview. So at the end of this layer of proofreading, I can use the keyword and pull up all the interviews. And by pulling up all the interviews, then I can make sure that I have everything that should be in the interviews. And you can do it with any number of different concepts. For example, if you want to check your subplot, maybe it's a romance, you can use a subplot and then it will pull up all of the subplot scenes, and you can check and make sure that the couple is together enough, or, you can just see it isolated from the rest of the novel. This is so helpful. So this is the layer that I add the keywords in. And then when I reach the end of this proofread, I go back and I look at the things that I want to look at. Another example is I also write, I have a vampire series, and I will use the keyword vampire events. So I can see all of the vampire events, what they are and where they occur in the book. Okay, so now we go into level 7. And level 7 is the hardcore proofread. Now, you might be thinking, if you're just going to give it to an editor, why do you have to knock yourself out with all this proofreading? And the answer is this. If your manuscript is full of mistakes, the editor's time is going to be eaten up making corrections that word spell check could have done for you, or Grammarly free verb check could have corrected for you. You want the editor to focus on your prose, your sentence structure, and things like this. Now, in this level, I also have a list of troublesome words. It's quite long. So I take my list, and in this level, I search and find these words, my troublesome words, and just check each one to see if I've used it correctly. And, it helps me find these little hidden errors that I tend to just read over. I'll give you an example. I know the word drawer in a desk is DRAWER, but for some reason, I spell it sometimes DRAW, and I proofread right over it. So there are several of these words that I have on my list that I have to be very careful of. So I always check all of my really troublesome words. And a lot of times they make it through the first level of proofreading. So that list is very helpful. The second thing I do is I check my chapters in Grammarly for a grammar verb tense check. Okay? And then once I do all of that, then I compile the document from Scrivener and I paste it into an ebook template and save it as a manuscript. And I file it in a folder entitled Pre-Publication. Then I open it in Word and run Word's spell check and grammar check on it again. Then I read it as a final proofread, even though there's one more proofread coming up. In this layer, I also check to make sure all the chapter names are in heading 1s for the table of contents. And then I fill in the other pages, the title page, the other books by page, the title and author page, the copyright, all those pages. I make sure that I have those now in the document. So once that's done, then I go to level 8, which is a final proofread with narration. So I subscribe to Microsoft 365, and they have the read aloud feature. I'm not sure if this is in the free Microsoft or not, but anyway, they have other readers online if you don't have Microsoft 365. But anyway, using the read aloud feature in Microsoft Word, I read the book aloud as I read along with it. This gives me an idea of how the book will sound in the reader's mind. I make any final corrections in this last proofread. And there are at least 2 or 3 changes that I make just by listening to how the sentences sound. So this one is very important. From here, once I get to the end of the book, from here, the manuscript goes to the editor. And then I forward it to myself as an EPUB. And while it's being edited, I read it again on my Kindle to see how it looks and how it feels from that perspective as a reader. And then once it comes back from the editor, then you're ready to make your final corrections, do your formatting, and set it for a pre-order. If you liked the video or learned anything, I hope you will give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. To the right are all of my books that are available for purchase on Amazon.com. Most of them are in Kindle Unlimited. I'll see you in the next video.